Welcome back to the Double Leg. I'm one half of the show, Hey Jai Picks. The other half of the show, The Parlay. Joining me in to break down some UFC 293. Let's get in. Is once again pay-per-view week. Is this card pay-per-view worthy? That is up to your discretion. But either way, we're going to go through the UFC 293. We got 12 fights in total, headlined by Israel Adesanya, Sean Strickland. Go through and break down every single one of these fights, and we'll give you our picks. That's not our bets. If you want our bets, you can jump in the premium membership. Link is in the description for that. Absolutely killed it last week, UFC Paris. Between both of us, we were almost up 14 units on the night. So quite the night. Hopefully we can keep that going into UFC 293. What do you think of the card?
Oh yeah, man. It's rough in some spots. There's some good matchups, but there's some fights that I just don't know what to expect. We got some UFC newcomers. We got some guys who, can't really buy a win right now. Haven't looked the best in their last outing. So it is interesting to just kind of see what the UFC's thought process is throwing together a card like this for the Australian people in Sydney. I mean, it's just a little weird and a little out of character for the UFC, but we got fights nonetheless and stuff to bet on. So I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, for the fan perspective, it's probably not the greatest card overall. But I mean, for betting perspective, picks wise, like sometimes these are the best cards because not a lot of people are going to get super invested. You don't get any like crazy steam one way or the other. So yeah, we'll try to take advantage of that. And let's start breaking these down. We don't waste any more of your time. We'll start it off with the main event, middleweight championship of the world. Israel Adesanya, the champion, coming in at minus 650 against the challenger, Sean Strickland, who sits at plus 425. Over under 4.5 rounds, minus 110 for the over, minus 120 for the under. Israel Adesanya, 4-1 in his last 5, 34 years of age for him, 6'4". And Sean Strickland, 32 years of age. It's going to be a tough matchup for him. Everyone knows it. I mean, there was a lot of problems as far as getting an opponent for Israel Adesanya, and he was obviously supposed to fight Dricus Du Plessis. Du Plessis says he can't because he's got the injury, so they kind of scrambled. They literally made this fight like a month ago. That's when it was announced. That's when it was like officially announced. I don't know how long Strickland knew he was going to be fighting for the title, but Izzy knew he was going to be fighting on this card, or at least main eventing it. It was just a matter of who he was going to face. Strickland gets the nod. I mean, it's probably one of the, I don't want to say like least deserved like title fights that a guy got, but it's not like anyone's, telling him that he shouldn't be fighting here because he's kind of the only guy at this point. But if you look at like what he's done to deserve this, it's a win over unranked Abus, a win against Nazardine at 205, not even at middleweight, a loss to Cannonier, a loss to Pereira, a split decision win against Jack Hermanson. Like, it's not like he's taking out these top contenders to like really go and solidify himself to get this title shot. But either way, Izzy, he's been at the top for a very long time. It's going to be a tough fight for Sean. Is there any way that he could pull it off?
Yeah, I don't know, man. It's tough for Sean for a lot of reasons. Like, first of all, stylistically, Sean on the feet, he can land really good volume. He can rack it up on guys like he did against Imavov, landing 182 significant strikes. Cannonier even, he landed over 150 strikes on him. So he can land, but Izzy, I don't know if Sean's really fighting these guys that are 6'4" and have the kickboxing pedigree that Izzy does, and who are in these 5-round fights for the last however many years. And he's going to have that, durability, and he's going to be able to match you on the feet for all 5 rounds. So for Strickland, I mean, if you would think he would try to wrestle at some point because he's just going to be tired of eating leg kicks and eating, that high kick from Izzy and just getting picked apart from the outside. But at the same time, I don't think his wrestling style really works on a guy like Izzy, who's that athletic and who can just kind of move away from Sean, circle out, and then go back to picking him apart on the feet. Like, I love Sean Strickland. I love watching him fight. He makes it fun. But that style of just kind of marching forward and throwing shots just doesn't work on guys like Alex Pereira and Israel Adesanya. It might work on Abus Magomedov and Nasruddin Imavov, and it's just insane that he's going from fighting those two guys to going to Izzy. And Izzy's the best in the world for a reason. I'm not saying Sean isn't deserving. I'm not saying he's not one of the best, but there's just a gap between some of these guys and Israel Adesanya, and I think we're going to see a big gap on Saturday.
Yeah, it's just a different animal you're going up against with Izzy. Like, Izzy's been fighting Alex Pereira the past half or year. Like, dude's going up against the best kickboxer, one of the best kickboxers in the UFC and of all time. So it's going to be a lot different going up against Sean Strickland. So if you expect Strickland to go in there and kind of wrestle, it's probably not going to happen, for one, because Strickland doesn't really like to do that. It's not really part of his game plan. Could he do that? Maybe. I mean, he's got Eric Nixick in his corner, who was Francis Ngannou's corner man when he fought Cyril Gane. Nobody expected Francis Ngannou to really go for takedowns, but he eventually did it and got a win that way. So who knows? Maybe Strickland goes in there and does land some takedowns and has some success. I highly doubt it, because it's just never been the way that he's fought, and I don't really see him having that game plan or having success. Like, anybody that fights Izzy other than Alex Pereira is always going to try to mix in a takedown. They just don't really have that much success. The only guy that did was Blachowicz, and he's a huge dude. So it's big difference there. Izzy probably gets it done. It's kind of like knockout or decision. Which one do you go for? I want to say Strickland is tough enough to make it to a decision, but I think Izzy knows that he needs a finish to actually make this worthwhile of a fight. Like, if he just goes out there and point fights him for 5 rounds, it's not going to be a good look for Izzy. So I think he goes for a knockout. I think he probably finds it, maybe some kind of head kick or some kind of follow-up combination, because Strickland is there to get hit because he likes to kind of absorb it on the shoulders, and he doesn't really check leg kicks all that often. If Izzy really goes hard at those legs early, he could batter him down to the point where Strickland can't really move out of the way of anything. So I'm going to go with Izzy probably by knockout.
Yeah, no, and another thing with Sean, it's he could go all 5 rounds to a decision with Izzy, but we've seen Izzy point fight in the past, and he's taken a lot of slack for it, and people not, saying he's not an exciting fighter or exciting champion. But I think the gap is going to be so large on the feet between these two that Izzy can kind of be a little bit more aggressive. I think he wants to take Sean out, honestly. I don't think he likes him one bit. The press conference is going to fuel him. I do think you see Izzy a little more aggressive on the feet because he's not really going to be worried about this massive power like a Yoel Romero or another slick striker like Silva when he fought him. So I think he's going to be a little more aggressive on the feet. It's at 4.5. I'm almost leaning the under right now, under 4.5 rounds, because at some point in this fight, if he catches Alex like that, I feel like he can catch Sean too. And Sean's been put down before, not that long ago. He is a tough dude though, so it won't be the easiest knockout of Izzy's career. But I think as the rounds go on, he could find that finish.
Yeah, and for Strickland, it's he doesn't have big one-shot knockout power. So Izzy could probably be a little bit more aggressive going for some combinations. Even when Pereira won by knockout, he didn't knock him down. He hit him with that left hook, still didn't knock Izzy down. So I think Izzy does have a pretty damn good chin too. So I would hope he goes out there and gets a finish if he's this big of a favorite. So I'll take him. Co-main event, heavyweight bout. Tai Tuivasa coming in at plus 200 against Alexander Volkov, who sits at minus 240. Over under 1.5 rounds, minus 125 for the over, minus 105 for the under. Volkov, ton of experience you see there with the 36-10 record. Tai Tuivasa, 15-5, 3-2 in his last 5. He's on a 2-fight skid, but don't let that fool you. I mean, his 2 losses in a row are Sergey Pavlovich and Cyril Gane. So he's been fighting at the very top of the heavyweight division, and he's getting another tough draw here, I think, against Volkov. Obviously, the line would indicate that. Volkov's 6'7", and Tuivasa 6'2". He's going to have a 5-inch reach disadvantage. Tuivasa will against Volkov. It's a tough frame to deal with But Tuivasa does have a win over Stefan Struve. It was a first-round knockout. Stefan Struve is 7 feet tall. So, I mean, he can fight these bigger guys. That is a little bit of something to get behind for Tai Tuivasa. We all know he's going to want to land that big bomb. Most of his wins come by knockout. And he could close the distance and find some success there if he can. But for Volkov, he's probably going to want to rock some teep kicks up the middle, take the Cyril Gane game plan of like keeping him at distance, and don't allow him to get going downhill on you. Because when Tai is allowed to swing and bang with you, you're probably not going to come out of that with a win unless you're Sergey Pavlovich, because nobody's beating Sergey Pavlovich if you're swinging and banging. So it's a tough fight. I think Volkov should win, but if he doesn't fight smart, he could definitely get knocked out. What do you think?
Yeah, here's what I don't like for Tai. And I love Tai as a fighter, and he's got a ton of hype behind him. Everybody loves Tai Tuivasa, but 6'7" for Volkov, like that's a big mountain to climb. If you're Tai, not a short guy by any means, but that's a lot of distance to cover, especially Volkov with the reach as well and the kicks up the middle. And for Tai Tuivasa, tremendous power, fun to watch. But you look at his last win was Derek Lewis, and that's really his only good win. If you look at his record in the UFC, he's knocked out and beaten Augusto Sakai, Greg Hardy, Harry Hunsucker. I mean, come on. It just sucks. I mean, compared to Volkov, I mean, when you look at Volkov, he's coming off the win over Romanov, which I'm not big on Romanov, but Jairzinho Rosenstruck, who's a dangerous striker, loses to Tom Aspinall, beats Marcin Tybura, loses to Cyril Gane. Like, this dude's fighting some pretty high-level guys, especially Aspinall and Gane. Regardless of if he won or lost those fights, he's in there with the best of the best. So I do like that for Volkov. But I don't necessarily like the odds against a big power puncher in Tai Tuivasa at home in Australia. The crowd's going to be rocking for Tai. But yeah, man, I want to take Tai so bad. And I think if you do take Tai, you just take him by knockout, because going all 3 rounds with a guy like Volkov, I think is going to be tough to get a decision win. A guy who's going to hit you with some shots, probably throw more volume at you and touch you a little bit more, but Tai's going to land some big shots, if he can close that distance. I just don't know. I think it's a closer fight maybe than the odds say, so that's why I would lean Tai betting-wise. But for the pick, I do think it's going to be pretty tough for him to land those big shots often against Volkov here. So I'm going to take Volkov to win. Unfortunately, I'm going to be rooting my ass off for Tai. But, betting-wise might be a different story. Might have to sneak one in there for Tai.
The thing that I noticed as far as film study goes is, like, Volkov has a lot of success when he's kind of closing the distance himself. And just kind of uses his length, like in the clinch with the knees, and even just inside, he'll rock the uppercut a lot. And that's not really a spot you want to be against Tai. So I would maybe look and see like a Volkov by decision prop, because I think Tai is going to be super tough in this one. I don't think if Volkov fights smart, he could just sit at range and pick him apart, because he does have a pretty decent chin himself. I mean, he's only been knocked out twice. And Volkov, really where he's been struggled with, like against the top guys, is getting taken down, like against Tom Aspinall, against Curtis Blades. And then nobody's really going to out kickbox Cyril Gane for 5 rounds. It's just usually not going to happen. And he tried that, didn't really work. But I mean, getting knocked out by Derek Lewis in the 3rd round, like with like 10 seconds left, otherwise he would have won by decision. I would probably look for a Volkov by decision prop, because if he fights smart, I think he just cruises to a win. But Tai, always dangerous for the knockout. He's not going to just sit there and take it. I don't think he will. So it's a tough one to take Volkov at chalk. So maybe you buy it down and look for the decision.
Yeah, and on the feet, like Tai does have a negative striking differential, so he does get hit quite a bit. And, it's kind of, you don't notice it as much unless he's fighting the Cyril Ganes and stuff, because, eventually against a lot of these lower level guys, he finds the big knockout, but he does get touched up in there. So it's going to be interesting. It'll be a fun fight.
Yeah. Flyweight bout here. Felipe dos Santos coming in at plus 250 against Manel Kape. Set at minus 350, over under 2.5 rounds, plus 150 for the over, minus 170 for the under. Manel Kape is the ranked fighter here. He's going up against the newcomer, Felipe dos Santos, who was supposed to be on the Contender Series, was it 2 weeks ago? And Haqparast pulls out of the Manel Kape fight. They need an opponent for Manel Kape, so they signed Felipe dos Santos, and he steps in here from going on fighting for a contract on Contender Series. Now he's on the main card of a pay-per-view. Pretty wild jump. But Manel Kape, he's had a lot of trouble with fighters pulling out as of recently. I think he just needs a fight at this point. He's 29 years of age, 22 years of age for Felipe dos Santos. Training out of Shoot to Box. You see the blonde hair there. Should be a fun fight. It's a lot to overcome for Felipe dos Santos, but he does fight pretty wild. Does have the ability of catching Manel Kape, but it's a tall task. You think he can pull it off or no?
There's always a chance. I just hate the fact that he's so, he's pretty new to MMA still, professional MMA. He's only 7-0, and you're fighting Manel Kape, who's got 24 professional fights under his belt, 18 wins. He's powerful. He's fast. He's a pest to deal with on the feet. Like his speed and accuracy too, and his movement is really, really good. And it's not like you're going to go and take him down very easily either. He's strong. He's got a decent takedown defense, and he's super athletic too. So for Felipe dos Santos to come in here and beat Manel Kape would be insane in my opinion. I like his style. I think it's fun. I think he's definitely got a future probably in the UFC if he can just have a decent showing of himself here, because those guys all coming from that camp just come in and they're tough and they're going to throw everything they have into it to get a win. But I mean, I think you're just going to see a fight where there's levels to this. Manel Kape is pretty damn good. I mean, he was about to fight Haqparast, and if he beats Kai, he's on the doorstep of a title shot. So you go from supposed to be fighting one of the best flyweights in the world to now you're getting a UFC debuter who is supposed to be on the Contender Series. Like, that's a massive step down. And honestly, I'm not going to say I'm surprised he took the fight, because he probably wants to, stay active and keep his name in that top 5, top 10 pool and really contend for a title shot. But to face a guy like Felipe dos Santos, it's kind of a big risk. Like, if he loses this fight, that's terrible. That's the worst case possible. But at the end of the day, I do think he's talented enough. He's going to be better everywhere. And I think he gets the win pretty easy here.
We saw this, I want to say like a month or two ago with David Dvorak and Steve Erceg.
Yeah.
Dvorak was ranked not as high as Kape, but either way, took on a newcomer in his debut and took a loss. So it is possible that Dos Santos comes in here and knocks off Manel Kape, but I don't think it's very likely, obviously, with the odds. But I mean, we've seen crazier things. Like minus 350 is not saying like it's 100% lock. Like,
yeah, for sure.
Still going to be a tough fight. We're talking flyweights too. There's a lot of variability as far as like outcomes go. These guys are super fast. They can hit hard. And Felipe dos Santos fights pretty dang wild. So it's a tough, it's always tough to take like heavy chalk and flyweights. I think Manel Kape gets it done, but I don't love the price too much with the way that Dos Santos fights.
Yeah, for sure.
Pick for sure. Heavyweight bout here. This is the rematch of the no contest eye poke back from the June card in Jacksonville. Justin Tafa coming in at minus 210 against Austin Lane, who sits at plus 170. Over under 1.5 rounds, plus 165 for the over, minus 195 for the under. So Austin Lane was going to make his UFC debut in Jacksonville. That's where he was on the Jacksonville Jaguars, so it's kind of like a homecoming for him. Goes out there against Justin Tafa, pokes him in the eye, and it's a no contest, so they said, let's run it back. But Justin Tafa wants it on his home turf in Australia. Interesting thing there. 6'6" there for the height. For Austin Lane, he's going to be much bigger as far as the verticality goes, but Justin Tafa, every bit of 265. Heavyweights here, not the highest level. Main card, this is like one of those where it's like, it's crazy that it's on a main card of a pay-per-view, but it is. And it's a greasy one. Justin Tafa minus 210 here. I mean, he wasn't that big of a favorite in the original fight. I think he was like minus 180. So he's gone up a little bit since the first fight, and it was only 29 seconds. Maybe that's just because it's on his home turf now, or what? But what are you thinking on this one?
Yeah, there wasn't really much to see out of Austin Lane to like really gauge at this level what he's going to be like. But I mean, again, the size and the athleticism just jump off the page to me for being this big of a dog. I do remember in that fight and going back and watching, he threw one body kick that landed flush, and dude, it snapped. I mean, you could hear that thing from the TV through the TV, and I was impressed by that because sometimes these guys aren't that technical. Like you look at Greg Hardy's and these guys that come in from another sport, but he looked like he was pretty damn technical from what you could see in his movement and the kick he threw. I mean, the single kick. But early on at least, he looked pretty damn good. I don't like that he's, not been fighting the highest level competition before the UFC. I mean, he does have some decent fights in there, but I mean, this is just Justin Tafa is decent on the feet, and if he can land, he's powerful. He puts guys down. He hasn't really been fighting the highest level competition either, though. I mean, he's got Parker Porter and Hunsucker as his last 2 wins. Loses to Jared Vandera and then Carlos Felipe by a split decision. So, I mean, I don't know. Maybe they match up a little bit closer than people think. I don't think Justin Tafa is necessarily a world beater by any means. I think Austin Lane definitely has a chance in this fight. I think the athleticism, like if he has a good game plan, and they're both kind of getting the double training camp for each other, right? Because the first fight was 29 seconds and gets rescheduled for 293. So maybe Austin Lane, more time to put in a good game plan here. Just don't get in close, don't get caught. Use your athleticism to, and your size, obviously, to stay at distance and land those big kicks, land some good shots, and get the win. So it's interesting for sure. It's hard to bet on Austin Lane, though, being that he's, a former NFL player coming to the UFC. We've kind of seen this story before. So that makes it tough. But I do think it could be a close fight. I'm going to take Austin Lane here.
Yeah, I don't hate the dog, honestly. I think it's probably dog or pass because Justin Tafa really just hasn't impressed all that much. Like you said, like Parker Porter, Harry's Hunsucker, like I get Austin Lane ain't like the highest level of heavyweight, but I would probably say it's a little harder to knock him out being 6'6" than the 6-foot Parker Porter who's going to stand in front of you and take it. I mean, he's also got losses to Jared Vandera, who's like straight cheeks, like straight up cheeks. Carlos Felipe, who's like another just absolute dog water. So, I mean, those are both by decision. So if I'm Austin Lane, I'm like, I don't give him the chance to knock you out because like you're so much bigger. We saw you whip a huge ass body kick in there. Just continue to stay at range. Don't give him the chance to land a big overhand left or anything like that. And he probably can get a win here. Just fight smart. I don't know if I could really trust him to fight smart. I mean, he's not like the most skilled guy. He hasn't been doing mixed martial arts his whole life. Obviously, a great athlete. Maybe he could put together a good game plan, but 35 years old, it's not like he has some great future at heavyweight. Yeah, I mean, it's a tough one to really get behind the chalk for Justin Tafa. So it's dog or pass for me. I'll go with you on the dog for the pick. Originally, I did have Justin Tafa in the first fight. But yeah, I just don't really like it. Just don't like it whatsoever for that price.
And Junior Tafa Austin Lane would have been the fight to make, not Justin.
That'd be better.
That'd be a lot of fun.
Junior is at least 6'3". He's got some good kickboxing.
Yeah,
like Justin Tafa, solid kickboxing, but like different with Junior. So
not as much athleticism.
Yeah, exactly. Light heavyweight bout here. Tyson Pedro coming in at -110 against Anton the Pleasure Man Turkalj sitting at -120. Over under 2.5 rounds plus 180 for the over, -220 for the under. 2-3 in his last 5 for Tyson Pedro, and a nice old 3-2 for Anton Turkalj. 2-fight losing streak for him. But if you look a little closer at his losses, they aren't anything that you could really hang your head on. Lost to Jilton Almeida in his UFC debut, and a loss to Vitor Petrino. His last time out, that was back in March. And they weren't like great performances, but those are two absolute units of men. And to lose to them isn't anything crazy. But either way, I mean, he's 0-2 in the UFC. And Tyson Pedro, I don't really know where he's at in his career because he came into the UFC super green. I mean, he was what 4-0 when he came into the UFC. He's been in the UFC since 2016. He had a pretty good start with the wins over Khalil Roundtree and Paul Craig, and then eventually goes on a 2-fight losing streak, gets the injury, comes back. They give him the Ike Villanueva treatment, the Harry Hunsucker treatment. They're trying to get him some wins, and he does. He looks good in those, obviously, because those guys kind of suck. And then last time out, he looks like he sucks. Against Makdessi Bukauskas, UFC 284. That was in Perth, Australia. He was set up. I don't want to say set up to win in that one, but he was a minus 220 favorite against Makdessi, and it looked like he didn't really have it in him in that one. And then it comes out that he had some kind of injury or illness going into the fight, but he still wanted to fight in front of the home crowd. So I don't know what to think with Tyson Pedro, but I'm not sure I'd think that highly of Turkalj either. So this is a tough one. What are you thinking?
Yeah, I've never really been that high on Tyson Pedro. Especially looking at his record, man. His last 2 wins are all these guys are beating Harry Hunsucker in their last few fights. But Harry Hunsucker and Ike Villanueva, and then before that, he took a loss to Shogun Hua, and then Oben St. Peru. Before that, there were 2 older guys who are now both retired, I believe. I know Shogun is. Not sure about. Is he too?
He should be by this.
Should be if he. Yeah.
I don't think he is.
Yeah, and outside of that, man, I mean, when he came into the UFC, damn near 7 years ago now, beats Khalil Roundtree and he beats Paul Craig. So those are 2 decent wins, but hasn't really fought anybody since then. And then loses to Bukauskas at home in your home country. That's tough. And I don't know. Obviously, he talked about injuries and stuff, but it almost looked like the pressure of fighting in front of that crowd got to him a little bit, because you could see it from the walkout. Like, he looked nervous, wasn't himself. And if he does that here against Turkalj, I think Turkalj is just going to take him down, wear him out, and kind of grind out that win, or even find a submission. Like, I look at Turkalj, and even though he's lost his first 2 UFC fights, you got to look at who he's losing to. I mean, he's losing to Jailton Almeida, who's on the come up, and a lot of people think is going to be that next title contender in the next couple of years. And then he loses to Vitor Petrino, who we saw live, I believe, at 290.
Yeah.
Was he at 290? Yeah. And he's a monster. He's super powerful. He's super athletic, and he has some wrestling to his name as well, and can get submissions. And Turkalj was able to go all 3 with him and basically match him in most areas. Significant strikes were pretty close. The takedowns were 5 for Turkalj and 7 for Petrino. So yeah, looking at that, like, those aren't the 2 worst losses you can take coming into the UFC, and it probably makes you better as a fighter, losing to guys like that. So yeah, I don't mind Turkalj here at all, especially against a guy like Pedro, who just hasn't really impressed, hasn't really beat any really good fighters lately, and he's lost to some pretty average ones. So the only thing he's really got going for him is being in front of his home country again, but he was last fight as well. So yeah, I think Turkalj probably gets this thing done. If he can just withstand the strikes on the feet from Pedro, he's going to land a takedown at some point in this fight. And once he does, I think his control is good. I think he'll be the better fighter in the grappling, and I think he'll pull out the win, whether it's by sub or decision.
This is one I'm keeping my eye on, because I think a lot of people are going to be down on Tyson Pedro after the loss, which is like totally warranted, because it was a tough one to look at. But I know he was in a lot of people's parlays for that UFC 284, and it's like kind of recent. And when he's in your busted your parlay, like, people are not quick to forgive that. So they're probably going to look at Anton Turkalj and see all the things that we just explained. Like, he's losing to some pretty solid guys, but I don't think he really looked that good in those fights. Like,
that's true too. Yeah.
Like, Vitor got a 30-26 on one of the judges' scorecards. Like, if you do look at the stats, it looks pretty like close, but Vitor should have had that dude knocked out like a couple times. He had him just dead to rights a couple times, and then he just, for some reason, wanted to grapple with Anton Turkalj. That was like some of the dumbest fight IQ that I've seen. Vitor is an absolute unit, but I think he might be missing a couple IQ points as far as the fight IQ goes, because he could have easily knocked Anton Turkalj out. He just wanted to grapple with him. Don't know why. So I think this might be like a buy low spot on Tyson Pedro. if he's the underdog against Anton Turkalj, I think I got to go with Tyson Pedro, because Tyson Pedro has been super respected by the books. I mean, he was minus 800 against Harry Hunsucker, minus 630 against Ike Villanueva. That was coming off of like a 3-year layoff. He was minus 630. I mean, minus 565 against Shogun Hua back in 2018, before Shogun was like really falling off. So I think this is a buy low spot on Tyson Pedro. I'm going to go with him. I think he's skilled. I just don't really think he's like, I don't think he's got that dog in him, but I think he's got the skills to go out there and get a win against Turkalj. Turkalj is a tough fighter, but I think he's just outmatched on the feet. I think Pedro can hang with him on the ground. So I got to go with the dog and Pedro.
I think you look at the weigh-ins too and see what kind of shape Tyson Pedro's in, because in his last fight against Bukauskas, he didn't really look that in shape, and I think it showed in that fight too. So if he comes to weigh-ins all shredded up and looks a little different, I think that'd be a good sign for him.
Yeah, good point. Another light heavyweight bout here. Carlos Ulberg coming in at minus 245 against Dawoon Jung. Sits at plus 205. Over under 1.5 rounds. Minus 150 for the over. Plus 120 for the under. Carlos Ulberg out of City Kickboxing. 32 years of old. 32 years of age. 4-1 in his last 5. Dawoon Jung, 6'4", 29 years of age. 2-2-1 in his last 5. And this is, I don't want to say like a bad matchup, but I don't really understand it too much. Like Dawoon Jung, he's coming off back-to-back losses. It looks like a setup for Carlos Ulberg to me. Like Carlos Ulberg is probably the more marketable guy. City Kickboxing, buddies with Izzy, trains with Izzy, better looking than Dawoon Jung. And Dawoon Jung just hasn't looked good as of late. Like knocked out against Dustin Jacoby, lost to Devin Clark, got wrestled up against Devin Clark. And but before that, like a win over Nzechiku, a win over William Knight, and a draw, a split draw to Sam Alvey. That ain't a good look whatsoever. So it ain't like he's beating some world beaters. Carlos Ulberg is on a 4-fight win streak. His only loss is to Kennedy Nzechiku, which was in his debut, and he nearly had Kennedy knocked out. And then he just kind of gassed out, and Kennedy took over and knocked him out. But since then, he's not beating like any world beaters either, like Ihor Pretoria, Negumereanu, Chukwi, and Fabio Cherant by decision. I mean, he's knocking guys out in the first round. I think he's got really good kickboxing. Obviously, that's where he's going to be the best at, and he probably puts it on Dawoon Jung. He could sit at range and probably kickbox him to a decision. I would hope he's a little bit more aggressive, though. You think he knocks him out, or you think Dawoon Jung has got a chance in this one?
Oh, man, I don't know. It's just from Dawoon Jung's last 2 performances, it just doesn't seem like he's that same fighter. And he's fighting better and better competition, and that'll happen with guys, as they kind of climb the rankings. Against Jacoby, gets knocked out for the first time in his professional career. And that was a great shot, and he kind of popped back up and protested. I do think, he was hurt pretty damn bad. But I look at like Jacoby kind of picking his shots and hitting him with straight rights down the middle like that, especially early in the fight. Like I see Carlos Ulberg kind of doing the same thing, because Ulberg has looked phenomenal on the feet. And I think his mentality is super solid too. And he really wants this, because you look at his last fight when he beat Ihor Potieria, gets him out of there in the first round, goes backstage immediately and starts training with Izzy to get Izzy ready for his fight later that night. I believe it was Izzy. It was either Izzy or somebody else at City Kickboxing. He was helping, who was fighting later that night. So this dude's just always in the gym. This dude takes it super seriously. And with that kickboxing pedigree, like for Dawoon Jung to come in here and either find the KO or outpoint him for 3 rounds, I just don't see it at all. I mean, Carlos Ulberg is a strong dude as well. He's a big, strong 205er, and when he lands, it's pretty powerful. And we saw it against Negumereanu, which Negumereanu is a pretty tough dude himself, and he was able to just put him down with ease. And I think he's a type of fighter too. As the fight goes on, I don't think he's going to have bad cardio. I think he's super technical, and he's technical enough where he's not wasting movements and throwing unnecessary shots that, kind of drain the gas tank. So yeah, overall, I think this is Carlos Ulberg all day, especially at home. I kind of agree with you. I think they might be setting him up for a win here.
Yeah, after the loss to Kennedy and Nzechukwu, the fight against Fabio Chiron, it kind of looked like Ulberg wanted to take it a little slower. He didn't want to gas himself out. And then he won by decision. I don't think he really got going that too much in that fight. And then his next 3 fights, he knocks the guy out in the first round. So I think he's got that aggressiveness back in him. I think he probably gets Down Jung out of there as well. I think it's kind of a setup. Down Jung just really hasn't impressed all that much. Like his 4 wins in the UFC don't age the best, to say the least. So got to go with Carlos Ulberg in this spot. And I'd probably say by knockout in round 1 or 2. A featherweight bout here. Jack Jenkins coming in at minus 205 against Kape Mariscal, sitting at plus 170. Over under 2.5 rounds, minus 185 for the over, plus 155 for the under. Both men 30 years of age. Both men 5'7", and a very similar reach there. 1 inch advantage for Kape. Coming in here against Jack Jenkins, who has looked pretty dang good in the UFC. He had a tough matchup his last time out against Jamal Emmers. I believe they were on the same card. That was the Jacksonville card.
Yeah.
And Jamal Emmers, I'm pretty sure Jamal Emmers beat him. He took the takedown route, and he grappled him up pretty dang good. Looks like that's probably going to be a good way to beat Jack Jenkins if you can have that good grappling, because on the feet, he's going to whip leg kicks. And Jamal Emmers is a long dude. He used his length pretty well in that fight. I thought he beat him. I had a bet on Jack Jenkins, and I was shocked that I cashed it in that one. But he's 2-0 in the UFC. He's looked pretty good. I mean, he's a fun fighter to watch. Same with Kape Mariscal. Took his UFC debut on short notice against Trevor Peek, and got a win against the fan favorite Trevor Peek, which was an absolute dogfight. And it was a fun fight to watch. Same card, like I said. So this should be a good fight. I think this might be one of the more fights that I'm like excited for on the card. Crazy that's on the prelims, and I'm saying that about a prelim fight, but it should be a fun one. What are you thinking?
Yeah, I think it'll be fun as well. I mean, for Kape to come in there and beat Trevor Peek, that's a perfect way to start your UFC career, because everybody loved Trevor Peek and was excited and thinking that he was going to get a big knockout. And I kind of even bought into it too, because if you look at Kape's record, he does have 3 knockout losses on it. But even though this is only his second UFC fight, he is, I believe, UFC level. He's been fighting guys like Steve Garcia, Joe Anderson, Brito, Bryce Mitchell, like while he was on the regional scene. So it's not like he's been fighting guys who are cans, and he's not ready for this level at all. Now, Jack Jenkins, another guy who can find knockouts and is going to have a lot of power. The only difference between him and a guy like Trevor Peek, obviously, is their technical striking, but Jack Jenkins is going to hit you with a lot of leg kicks. And, that's one thing Kape didn't really have to worry about against Trevor Peek. I think Kape showed his chin was pretty durable against Trevor, got hit with some good shots. But when you mix in leg kicks nowadays in today's MMA, like, it changes the whole game. Like, you take 2 or 3 off the bat that are solid, like, it can change the whole fight. And we've seen Jack Jenkins do that time and time and time again. So yeah, for Jack, I think if he gets on those early, he's going to have a good showing. And I don't know if he's going to knock Kape out or get the TKO, but I think if he can just get the leg kicks going, man, he's gonna win the fight for sure. Especially being at home, he's gonna be pumped up. I think he's got a little marketability to him too. I think the UFC wants him to keep winning. Chepe's no easy out, but I'm gonna lean Jack Jenkins here.
Yeah, I love watching both these guys fight, but for Jenkins, like, the leg kicks is always going to be a problem. Like, everyone, if you know anything about Jack Jenkins, there's always that thing that he knocked out like 5 guys or broke 5 guys' legs or whatever that he's beaten. So that's a dangerous thing. If you're Kape, he's got like a lot of good experience. Like, he's fought like 5 or 6 UFC guys before he even got into the UFC. And then to fight a guy like Trevor Peek, who's like super raw as far as the sport goes. I was on Kape. I thought he would be the better mixed martial artist. He went out there with a pretty solid game plan and just weathered the storm that Trevor Peek threw at him. Trevor Peek's never going to waver, but you could tell he was gassing out after, 1.5 to 2 rounds into the 3rd round. Kape was kind of cruising at that point. I think Kape is always going to come in with a pretty solid game plan, even though he is like an all action fighter. He still fights fairly calculated, trains at Elevation Fight Team. It's a great camp. Jack Jenkins coming in at a 2-1 favorite kind of scares me because Kape is so experienced against high level fighters and trains at a good camp. He's well rounded. That does scare me, but I'm going to go with Jack Jenkins for the pick. I think he just probably hits him harder, hits him more often, and can fight off the takedowns if Kape does go to him. And if you're taking down Trevor Peek, it's not like saying the most because Trevor Peek doesn't have like some great takedown defense. He's not super skilled when it comes to that. So I think Jenkins could probably stuff him a little bit better. I'm going to go with him for the pick. Lightweight bout, Jamie Mullarkey coming in at minus 265 against John Makdessi, sitting at plus 215. Over under 2.5 rounds, minus 200 for the over, plus 165 for the under. Makdessi, 38 years of age for him. Jamie Mullarkey coming in here as a pretty sizable favorite after getting knocked out his last time out against Muhammad Naimov, and he was like a minus 400 favorite in that one. I think he was like the biggest favorite on the card. Jamie Mullarkey was, and he got knocked out. So sizable favorite here going against the veteran John Makdessi. Jamie Mullarkey going to have a size advantage over him. You see the reach, 6-inch advantage for the reach, and a 4-inch advantage in the height. He's going to be fighting in his home country of Australia. So there's that for him. Looked pretty good his last time out in Australia against Francisco Prado. Got a decision win there. Looked calculated, looked pretty sharp everywhere the fight went, and got a pretty easy decision win. But we were both pissed that Prado didn't really let anything go. And then you look at him fight Naimov. Naimov let it go, and it worked out. So is John Makdessi going to let it go? What are you thinking in this one?
Yeah, you look at Mullarkey's last loss, of course, the big knockout that nobody really saw coming, and by a UFC newcomer. It kind of put a sour taste in everybody's mouth for Jamie Mullarkey. But, I mean, you look at the odds, he's still not really getting disrespected because of that performance. And against Makdessi, who hasn't really had a knockout since 2015. So we're going on 9 years here without a knockout. He's a decent striker, but I just think Jamie's more versatile. I think, he can mix in the takedowns, obviously. He will get a couple submissions here and there on the feet. It's not like he's a bad fighter. He's technical. He'll land his shots as well. I don't think he's going to go out there and flatline Makdessi or anything on the feet. I do think as this fight goes on, it's going to favor Jamie Mullarkey. I think he's going to mix in the takedowns and mix in the grappling and stuff. And, Makdessi, I've never been super high on him, but he's an older dude for any age really, but to fight at this level against Jamie Mullarkey in his home country, I just don't see a big recipe for an upset here. I do think Jamie's the better, well-rounded fighter, and he's going to show that on Saturday. I think Jamie gets the win.
Yeah, I think it's kind of a clear setup for Jamie to get a win.
Got to be.
At the same time, it's like John Makdessi, he's that veteran. He could pull something out of his bag of tricks. He does have a win against Jesus Pinedo, who's fighting for $1 million in PFL and took out two of the better guys in PFL. So there's something. But then he's got a win over Ignacio Bahamondes as well, who's 6'3". He gave up a lot of in the reach department there against Ignacio and was still able to overcome it. If he can get on the inside against Jamie Mullarkey, he can have some success. He has the ability to put up a lot of significant strikes. Against Nasrat, he still outstruck Nasrat, but it's just like the significance when he lands is just not the same as a lot of his opponents. Being 38 years old, you don't quite have that snap on your shots anymore. So, yeah, if it goes to a decision, I don't really like the chances that he gets the decision unless it's super clear, especially, being in Australia, fighting an Australian. So it's probably a Jamie Mullarkey win. But either way, like minus 250 on Mullarkey is just not really a great thing to do. Like, I remember we talked about it when he fought Naimov. We're like minus 400 on Mullarkey. Not even throwing that in a parlay. Like, just got parlay buster written all over it. So even here, it's like at this point, you got to prove it to me once again for Mullarkey to bet on you. I'm probably going to pass on Mullarkey throughout the week, but for the pick, I'll take him. Lightweight bout here, Nasrat Haqparast sitting at minus 500 against the newcomer Landon Quinones sitting at plus 350. Over under 2.5 rounds, minus 150 for the over, plus 120 for the under. So Landon Quinones stepping in on short notice to fight the veteran Nasrat Haqparast, and he is quite a sizable underdog. Haqparast, 28 years of age, just picked up the win over John Makdessi, who we just talked about. And I mean, that was a good bounce back win for him, but definitely should have beat John Makdessi, who was on a 2-fight losing streak against Bobby Green and Dan Hooker, who just kind of put it on him. So it was a good win for him to get back on track. He's getting a newcomer here in Landon Quinones, who is on the Ultimate Fighter this past season, lost to Jason Knight by triangle choke in less than a minute in the first round of the tournament, I guess, the Ultimate Fighter tournament. So he was out there pretty quick. He comes back here, still gets a shot in the UFC. I think he could pull off an upset in his debut.
I'm honestly surprised that they brought him in for this fight, out of all people. A little surprising. You get finished like that on the Ultimate Fighter, and hey, by the way, let's fight on a pay-per-view card against, a decent fighter. I'm not real high on Nasrat Haqparast, but if the fight's on the feet, like, he's pretty damn good. His boxing's pretty damn slick, and he can rack up significant strikes, and he outstrikes a lot of opponents who aren't Bobby Green and Dan Hooker. Guys that are under that level, Nasrat Haqparast is going to he's going to compete with anybody on the feet. And in this fight, if Quinones can't come in and clip him with a big shot or find an early TKO or some kind of stoppage, I think Nasrat's going to do the same to him as he does to all of his other opponents that he has wins over. Just rack up significant strikes, stay at range, and just box you up. I do think he's a pretty decent boxer. So, yeah, honestly, just confused why Landon Quinones is even getting this opportunity. I feel like no hate on him or knock to him, but out of everybody you could have picked, like, it just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. I know on the Ultimate Fighter, he takes the loss to Jason Knight, who's a vet and made it pretty far in the show, but just a little confusing to me. I think Haqparast wins this thing probably by decision. If Quinones can just tough it out, probably gets another decision. That's how Nasrat Haqparast wins a lot of his fights, especially lately. But yeah, I think it's going to be pretty lopsided if it stays on the feet. Yeah,
he must have impressed throughout the Ultimate Fighter house or like in training something, because he's at the UFC PI or the Apex for however long. So he must have impressed doing something there. His only loss is to Muhammad Naimov, who's in the UFC. We just talked about, who knocked out Jamie Mullarkey. That was by a split decision in Titan FC. That's kind of where he's been doing a lot of, or pretty much all of his professional career is Titan FC. He's gotten a good amount of knockouts, 5 to be exact, 2 in the first round, 2 in the second round, 1 in the third. So looks like he can carry over the finishing ability into the later rounds. He'll be dangerous at first, but Nasrat probably settles in and cruises to a decision. I would probably think so. I mean, it's a tough spot for Quinones to come in. And, if you go to the Ultimate Fighter and you don't make it through, you're probably going to take any opportunity you can to get to the UFC. So it's probably why he's taking this one here, just getting the foot in the door and fulfilling the dream. So I'm going to go with Nasrat for sure. Welterweight bout here, Charlie Radtke coming at minus 300 against Blood Diamond, who is back, and he is coming in at plus 225, over under 2.5 rounds, plus 155 for the over, minus 185 for the under. Charlie Radtke is 33 years of age, making his UFC debut, and 4-1 in his last 5. Blood Diamond, 35 years old. So, 35 years old. This is going to be his 3rd fight in the UFC. If you look at his career in the UFC, it hasn't been good. He's 0-2 and lost to Orion Kosi, who has been cut, and that was a decision loss, and then got choked out in the first round by Jeremiah Wells. So there's that. He's Izzy's buddy. He trains at City Kickboxing. He's like a longtime friend of Izzy. It's kind of why he got in the UFC, but he does have a long career of kickboxing. He's actually got a kickboxing fight against Sharaputin Magomedov. He lost a decision to Sharaputin Magomedov. If you don't know who that is, you'll find that out in UFC 294 on the Abu Dhabi card when he makes his debut. But Blood Diamond, it's very clear, like the guy, he's a kickboxer. He can't wrestle at all. He got submitted his first fight, and he got taken down by Orion Kosi in his second fight, and that's pretty basically why he lost. Charlie Radtke, pretty damn good grappler, so it's going to be a tough fight for Blood Diamond. That's why you see the odds. I would probably think Charlie Radtke, don't even mess around on the feet, shoot doubles. You'll probably end up getting one eventually. Get him to the ground, use your jiu-jitsu. Radtke was supposed to grapple Joe Pyfer back in May, had to pull out, and then Pyfer grappled Jared Mearshart. But if you look at his professional MMA career, losses to Austin Hubbard, Chris Gonzalez, and Justin Montalvo. The wins, it's not like he's doing anything crazy on the regional scene. Like, let's just be clear there. He looks like he's training partners with Bilal Muhammad and Ignacio Bahamondes, that whole group. And it seems like he's improving as far as everything goes. I think he probably goes in there and subs Blood Diamond early. But if Blood Diamond can fight it off, like, he's got a chance on the feet. What are you thinking of this one?
Yeah, Blood Diamond definitely has a chance on the feet, but it's just, it kind of sucks for him. You know, he's 3-2 in his pro career at this age. Probably got to the game a little bit late, you know, coming from kickboxing, maybe a little too late. And the UFC is not really doing him any favors at all. I think they maybe tried in his last fight against Kosi. It didn't work out. And, you know, if Kosi's coming in there and taking you down and doing what he did to you on the ground, I don't see how Radtke doesn't, unless he just has terrible fight IQ and tries to strike with him. Because if he tries to strike with him, Blood Diamond is obviously super dangerous and he's damn good at what he does on the feet. But for Radtke, I mean, the blueprint's out there on how to beat Blood Diamond, and you have that game that should beat Blood Diamond. And, you know, if he doesn't, it's just kind of going to be it's one of those things where he probably has poor fight IQ or gasses out somehow. I don't see any other way that he loses this fight unless he stays on the feet or he gasses out in this fight. That's all. That's really what it comes down to for me. I do see Radtke finding a submission here or some kind of TKO ground and pound, because I do think once he gets him down, he's going to get into dominant position. He's going to get to mount, get his back, something of those sorts. And from there, you know, look for the finishes. So, yeah, I think he beats Blood Diamond here. And it's unfortunate because, you know, Blood Diamond buddies with Izzy, City Kickboxing on the card in Australia, and the UFC throws you a pretty damn good grappler. Not the best fight for him, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's just there's not really any good fights out there for him either.
There's really not.
It's like they brought in Charlie Radtke, who's like, I don't know. I mean, I don't really think he's like UFC caliber at this point. So it's kind of like they're throwing him a bone, but either way, I don't know. Like, would you match him up with another striker? Like, I don't know. It's just tough to match anybody up for Blood Diamond. But yeah, it's Charlie Radtke is going to be the pick for me. Featherweight bout here, Shane Young coming in at -184 against Gabriel Miranda, sit at +155. Over under 1.5 rounds, -205 for the over, +170 for the under. Gabriel Miranda coming in. This is his second fight in the UFC. And the first fight was against the man, Benoit Saint-Denis. He got finished in the second round. Shane Young, not sure how he's still on the roster, but he is. And he's getting kind of a layup here, too. Like, Gabriel Miranda is not the best. Shane Young, he's on a 3-fight losing streak. He's got 6 fights in the UFC. This might be the last one, or last on his contract. He's 2-4 in the UFC. Like, when I watch Shane Young, I just don't really see him go for it whatsoever, at least over this losing streak. I expected him to come back against Blake Builder after nearly 2 years off and look improved or look like he wants to go out there and take somebody's head off. Didn't see it. So that loss to Blake Builder doesn't age the best either because Blake Builder just lost to Kyle Nelson. So it's like Shane Young ain't looking too good here. But then I look at Gabriel Miranda. I'm like, this dude is kind of sub or bust. You look at a lot of the fighters that he's fighting against, they're not very good either. So it's a tough one. This is like scraping the bottom of the barrel for 145. What are you thinking of this one?
Yeah, Shane Young has a fight against Alexander Volkanovski in his UFC debut on the Fabricio Verdum versus Marcin Tybura card back in 2017. So there's some good experience there. Who would have thought where these two would be in such different, places in their careers right now? But yeah, for Shane Young, man, can't buy a win right now. Hasn't looked the best. I don't see. Man, it's hard to say because Gabriel Miranda, although he's only had one fight in the UFC and it was to Benoit Saint Denis, like he did land a takedown there, and everybody knows that Gabriel Miranda is pretty dangerous on the ground. So if he could get the fight there, I think he has a chance to win. Like that's his path to victory here. But at the same time, he got knocked down 3 times by Saint Denis, who's obviously powerful. We just saw him in his last fight, and Gabriel Miranda on the feet didn't look too impressive at all. Where Shane Young at least has some decent volume. He gets hit a little bit. But if he keeps the fight on the feet here, he should either find a finish, get the knockdown, ground and pound, something of those sorts, or win the fight. But I wouldn't sleep on Gabriel Miranda's wrestling, honestly. Like Shane Young has been taken down in the last fight against Builder. He was taken down a couple times against Omar Morales. And if like I keep saying, man, if Miranda gets guys on the ground, his jiu-jitsu is high enough level to where he can find submissions and he will find finishes. So there is a chance there. That's his path to victory. For the pick, I would think Shane Young, like you said, I don't know if this is necessarily a layup, but he should be favored to win in this fight. Like he should be the better fighter, but there's always that chance when you get those good jiu-jitsu artists who have decent takedowns that they pull off the upset. So it's just dicey, man. This is so low level. I hate this fight. And for the pick, I'm going to take Shane Young, but it's just weird. It's one of those fights, weird things can happen.
I hate this one because there's not a chance in hell I'm taking Shane Young at chalk.
Yeah.
And on the other side, you're getting Gabriel. Yeah. It's like, come on. Like, I gotta pick between two evils here. Miranda, the thing I will say about him is he goes for it. Like, he will force Shane Young to fight early, too. Like, he comes out swinging. The fight against Benoit, he came out pretty hot, landed a takedown, like you said. But Benoit just was like, all right, no, you ain't doing this, buddy. You're getting knocked out. So I would expect he comes out, tries to do that against Shane Young. Will Shane Young pull the Benoit and say, nah, buddy, you ain't doing that? I don't have confidence that he's going to do that because he just hasn't unloaded anything over the past like 2 or 3 fights. So, yeah, I don't know. I mean, for the pick, I'm going to go with the dog, Gabriel Miranda, but Shane Young, you got to get a win here, buddy. Otherwise, you're getting out.
Gabriel Miranda, 15 wins by submission out of his 16 wins. So if it hits the ground, he's super dangerous. I mean, I think he's the more dangerous fighter. That's crazy to say maybe, but I mean, he is the finisher out of the two. So it's dicey.
Yeah, very dicey. Welterweight bout, Kiefer Crosbie coming in at plus 120 against Kevin Jousset, sitting at minus 150 over under 1.5 rounds, minus 170 for the over, plus 140 for the under. Jousset, he's from France, but he trains at City Kickboxing. And part of the reason why he's on this card, Kiefer Crosbie out of SBG Ireland. You see the Irish flag there. 33 years of age for him, making his UFC debut. Both men are making their UFC debut. So a couple of debuters to start off the card. An interesting scrap. Not really sure why it's on the card. Maybe just to beef it up. I don't really think either of these guys has some crazy future in the UFC. Kiefer Crosbie has had 7 fights in Bellator. Not sure why they didn't want to keep him around, but the fact that he's getting picked up by the UFC after the Bellator was like, don't really need you anymore. Probably says everything that you need to know. But he does have a win over Alex Oliveira, Cowboy Oliveira. Back in April, knocked him out in the first round. The thing with Kiefer Crosbie is he's going to fight like a dog. Basically, he's just going to get in some type of dog fight with you, throw some hands, and that's going to be it. Kevin Jousset, city kickboxing, but like you watch his kickboxing, it's nothing crazy. It's really nothing crazy. It's almost like it's a second nature to him to like go out there and get into a cage fight. It doesn't really, when I watch him, I don't really see like anything crazy. He does have some crazy judo throws though. I don't know if you saw that on film, but if you get in the clinch with Kevin Jousset, like he's going to throw your ass and you're going to land up on your head. So Kiefer Crosbie better be ready for that. Jousset does have a good amount of finishes, 4 to be exact, and then 4 by decision. It's only lost or got 2 losses, 1 by split, and the other is to Jack Della Maddalena, round 2 doctor stoppage. So interesting scrap. Who you got on this one?
Yeah, you look at Jousset, and I think he's probably the more methodical fighter of the two, like on the feet. Like you mentioned, his kickboxing doesn't blow you away, but he does look decently technical. He's fought decent competition lately too. I'm not going to pronounce his name. I'm going to try Gagnol Nolo, 11-1 in Hex Fight Series. Beats a guy who's 12-6. At least the guy had some experience. And Kit Campbell, but you know he's got experience against guys like Jack Della Maddalena. He's fought decent competition, but for Kiefer Crosbie, I feel like he could come in and he's the fighter that wants to bite down on the mouthpiece and just get in these exchanges with you and hope something connects. Like that could overpower or overwhelm a guy like Jousset who wants to fight more technical and stuff. And so if they get in a brawl, like this is Kiefer Crosbie has a chance to land something big and hurt him or put him away. I do worry about Kiefer Crosbie doing that too early and too often and kind of blowing the gas tank and then Jousset kind of picking him apart as the fight goes on. I like that Jousset's at home here. He's a city kickboxing guy. I feel like a lot of people are going to be rooting for him, and he's just it could be one of those city kickboxing cards where all these guys start racking up wins. But you got to be careful with Kiefer Crosbie because you've watched film on him. You see him come in there, and when he bites down on the mouthpiece, like he swings. So I do think Jousset, though, more technical. I think if he just survives an earlier storm, he'll probably cruise to a win here. So I'm going to take him for the pick.
Yeah, I'm kind of seeing the same things. Like Crosbie probably live early. Jousset can settle in and make it a little bit more of a technical match. Maybe even mix in those judo throws and look for some takedowns. That would probably help him. I was watching Israel Adesanya's YouTube, and Eugene Behrman was saying that Jousset was getting the better of Israel Adesanya the other day. So who knows? Maybe he's making some good improvements.
Might be a hype job.
Yeah, I would think so. Because they like announced that he got signed to the UFC in that video or whatever. He's like, yeah, he's been putting in some good work with Izzy. Yeah, he got the better of him the other day. I was like, yeah, I don't know about that one, buddy. But yeah, I'm gonna go with Jousset. I mean, it's 2 newcomers. It's not like you can get too carried away with this one, but he's gonna be the pick for me. And that is the picks for UFC 293. 12 fights in total. We got a 6:30 p.m. Eastern time start, so we're back on the normal pay-per-view schedule. We were a couple early cards past couple weeks. We'll be back to the evening cards for us in the U.S. And looking forward to it. An interesting card, always a great great time to have a pay-per-view card. Usually gonna have a lot more hype around it. This one, not the best, but we're getting a title fight nonetheless. Maybe Strickland can pull off some crazy upset, but we're going to look to try to make some money. If you want to get on the Double Leg Premium membership, hit the link in the description to get a part of that. You can hop in the group chat, chop it up there, and you'll get all the bets for every single UFC card every week. Got any messages to the viewers for UFC 293?
We're hot right now, and we've been hot on pay-per-views, so all summer long. It's going to be a fun betting card because there's some matchups to where I think you and I are both seeing the fights really, really well right now and seeing who's going to win. So I'm looking forward to it, even though it's a lackluster pay-per-view. We got some good matchups and should find some finishes on this one too.
Yep. Stay up to date with everything at the Double Leg on Instagram so you can get all the updates. You can follow me on all the medias at HeyJaiPicks. Where can they find you?
On all social medias at the Parlay MMA.
All right, if you're watching here on YouTube, drop a sub to support the channel, drop a like. Till next time, the Double Leg signing out.